I'm Sarah Morris, France 24 correspondent based in Madrid, bringing you news, reports and analysis on Spain and Portugal. So join me here on France 24.
Sarah Morris, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world.
Welcome to Election Night Live on France 24. After 4 weeks of political turmoil, unseen for decades, we are half an hour away from finding out who the voters want to run the country.
And we'll be finding out whether that choice is the far right. Has the National Rally built on its success in the first round of the parliamentary elections? And if so, will it now have a majority to govern?
All of this taking place because of the gamble taken by President Macron on the 9th of June, within an hour of discovering that the far right had come out on top in the EU elections. With the snap vote, he said he was putting trust in the French people to make the right choice. But the first round's already seen his party wiped out from half the 577 constituencies across the country.
Now, a hastily assembled left-wing alliance is in second place, and this week parties long opposed to the far right have been working together, tactically pulling out from many races where there was a three-way contest. That to make it today a binary choice for France between the National Rally and those against.
It's a night of profound consequence for the future of France, as well as international implications. So we'll be crossing to Brussels, Washington, Kyiv, Berlin, Rome and London too. But first, with the results as they come in, our teams reporting from where the parties are gathering. Catherine Norris-Trent is at the National Rally on the outskirts of Paris in Cheney-de-Roi.
Yinka Oyetade is with the left-wing France Unbowed Party for us this evening. Luke Brown is at the office of the Prime Minister, Gabriel Attal, and Antonia Kerrigan is our reporter out and about in the streets of Paris speaking to voters.
With us in the studio is our French politics editor, Marc Perelman. Hello, Marc. Now, you've been speaking to many of the politicians across the political spectrum in the past few days. Just give us an idea of the reflective moods in each camp.
The mood is astonishment still about the decision of Emmanuel Macron, and also really plunging into the unknown, because those are truly uncharted elections. We've never had those kind of midterm election. And what Nadia just described, what happened between the two rounds, all this alliance against the National Rally could absolutely, truly change the result of the election. It seemed that the National Rally was on the cusp of power last Sunday. It's much more uncertain tonight.
Well, let's welcome our other guests in the studio for the beginning of this live programme. With me here, Mathieu Doré from the Ipsos polling agency. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
And also next to me here in the studio, Patrick Vey. Both of you, gentlemen, can I just get your initial thoughts on the stakes tonight here in France? Go ahead, sir.
Will the National Rally get a majority? And if they don't get a majority, who will come first?
Huge questions. Sir, go ahead.
I think the question is there a glass ceiling for the National Rally? And did they count their chickens well?
Big questions indeed.
We're going to also get the latest analysis, fast fingers on the digi-screens. Tika, Laurent breaking down the results, deciphering the numbers as they come in. We've already got significant numbers, high turnout figures.
Very high indeed, Gavin. We can give you that figure. It's 67.1%. That's about 2 points higher than the first round a week ago, and very high, highest in decades as we've seen.
Right, much more from Deep Tea throughout the evening here, but now let's go live to Catherine Norris-Trent. She's our reporter covering the National Rally. She's in the east of Paris for us this evening. Catherine, the mood tonight where you are?
The mood here is very nervous, Nadia. People I've been speaking to, supporters of the National Rally, are hoping that their party can pull something off, can become the biggest party in Parliament. Even some are still hoping they can get an overall majority, but I have to say they're not seeming very confident on that score. And in fact, among people I've been speaking to, they seem to be bracing for not a good surprise from their point of view. There's a lot of talk about the injustice of France's electoral system and that this is a time for change. So I'm not sure if it's going to be a big party here tonight. There is lots of champagne. There are many, many people here as well. We've got around 500 campaigners, activists, members of the RN, as well as press and TV crews from all around the world waiting to see if this is the big moment when the far right becomes the biggest party in French Parliament. But as I say, it's a tense wait here until 8 p.m. Paris time when those numbers will finally come in.
It's really interesting, Catherine, given the mood compared to last week and this week. I want to go to Matignon, the office of the Prime Minister of France, Gabriel Attal, at the moment. Luke Brown, our reporter, is there. Hello, Luke. What's going on where you are?
Yeah, we've just had a couple of vehicles driving past. It could well have been the Gabriel Attal. We know that Gabriel Attal has already been meeting with Emmanuel Macron, the French president. He left about just over an hour ago to discuss the upcoming results. Of course, here in France, 501 voting seats are still up for grabs in this second round. That's after the 76 were decided in the first round. All eyes here at the Matignon Palace on the score of the Ensemble governing coalition. Back in 2022, they got 245 seats, almost certainly set to fall. They are looking to see to what extent they can limit the damage there. As I mentioned, the Prime Minister, Gabriel Attal, has already been meeting with Emmanuel Macron. That started about 6:30. Give or take an hour. He may well already be on his way back to the Matignon residence here. The president's entourage has already indicated that he may or may not give a speech to the nation, depending on the outcome and on the results of the vote. That could, well, of course, take place in the hour after 8 p.m. Of course, that is what occurred in the wake of the European elections 3 weeks ago, which really has kicked off the current situation.
Luke Brown, for the moment, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's go a little further north from where Luke is, and let's speak to our reporter Yinka Oyetade. She's in the 19th arrondissement of Paris. That's where La France Insoumise, or France Unbowed in English, the left-wing party, is gathering this evening. Yinka, Catherine Norris-Trent was talking about nervousness among the national rally this evening as we wait for polls to close. The mood then where you are?
Well, I'd say the mood here is very much a charged up mood. We're seeing people gathering here just behind me. You have that stage, and that is where the party leaders are going to be making speeches throughout the night. And the election night is really going to be split into two parts. First of all, we're going to see the France Unbowed party gather here. We're expecting the divisive Jean-Luc Mélenchon to speak in just a little while. And then we'll have all of the parties from that new Popular Front coalition gather here. Just a reminder, those parties are the Socialists, the Greens, the Communists, and of course France Unbowed. Now in the first round they got around 28% of the votes. It's unclear how they'll do this time round, just with how many of their candidates have withdrawn from those three-way races. So we'll have to see, but we are going to definitely see some of the scenes that we saw from last week at the Place de la République. We're expecting to see supporters really come out in force here and really send that message of defiance and resistance throughout the course of the night.
Yinka, thank you. And we have exactly 21 minutes and 40 seconds until we will get the moment of revelation, those early predicted results tonight. I want to go to Antonia Kerrigan at the polling station in the centre of Paris. Antonia, give us a sense of the atmosphere. What's going on there?
Well, you've seen the figures. It's a historic turnout, and people we've spoken to have really reflected this narrative of a country galvanised. We've spoken to people in the streets, we've spoken to people at polling stations. The votes have been coming in thick and fast. Voters have been lining up here in the 8th arrondissement. Let's have a listen to what some of those we spoke to in the street had to say.
It's a very uncertain political climate, so it's very important that we do our duty as citizens.
It's very important to vote, and everyone should. It's important not only to be well represented, but to show whether we agree or don't agree with what's happened in past years.
I vote at every election, and I'm also campaigning for a party. The stakes are very high.
Well, these may be committed, regular, politically engaged voters, and so maybe they're not part of this national story of a huge skyrocketing in turnout. However, what we also saw was people going above and beyond, people who were in Paris today who couldn't vote in their home constituencies, who had nominated proxies to vote on their behalf. We also saw people acting as proxies, people going from one polling station to another to vote on behalf of a friend or family member. We even saw someone who had signed up to an online platform to be the proxy of someone, a stranger. That's how important she thinks it is to make sure all voices are heard from her political camp. It's worth noting that turnout for legislative elections in France is usually extremely low. The last two parliamentary elections have seen turnout below 50%, and that's a bit, being outperformed by European elections in turnout. This year is an exceptional case. Usually, of course, legislative elections become 2 months after presidentials. That means there's an extremely long political campaigning season, and there's an enormous electoral fatigue that sets in. People also think that they know what's going to happen because a president's just been elected, so of course the Assembly is going to line up behind that. However, this time we've interrupted the normal electoral political calendar, the middle of a parliamentary term in the middle of a presidential term, and people, what they're telling us is the same thing coming back over and over again. They don't know what's going to happen, and they say the stakes have never been this high.
As we're talking to you, Antonia, we're seeing the live images and some of the images of people voting towards the end of the day, the last moment, and it's hardly busy behind you. There's not exactly a last rush to get the votes done in Paris. Has it been up until this point?
Well, certainly what I can tell you is this is a polling station where when I checked in just a few minutes ago, they were already at 65%. Voting seems to have happened in this polling station a little bit more slowly than it was last week. This is, of course, a duel rather than a triangular, and it's not a duel where there's been someone stepping aside. So perhaps voters here are a little bit less galvanised than they were elsewhere. But we've seen out in the streets, we've seen a different trend, we've seen a different story, we've seen enormous mobilisation in other places. Of course, it's quietening down now as it is the end of the evening.
Let's get the bigger picture then on polling. Antonia Carrigan for now, thank you. And let's bring in Mathieu Duret from Ipsos polling company. Good evening again. You're hearing Antonia there saying that pretty high turnout at that polling station where she's at, something like 65%. The national turnout, we understand, over 67% turnout. Really high. How do you account for that?
Yeah, high compared with all previous legislative elections that took place after a presidential election, but not high when compared with snap elections in 1997, which means that obviously the stakes are higher when the election is a standalone one, not just a confirmation vote after a presidential election, which, to be honest, is seen as more important to most voters. So, of course, when the legislative elections are an opportunity for the voters to decide who is in charge, turnout is necessarily higher. And last time was 1997.
So when we see this moment of reveal, the Ipsos early predicted results, if we go back in time, Mathieu, and if we look at previous elections, how accurate usually are they?
For legislative elections, the real challenge is to get it right about who's winning an outright majority, that is 289 seats. And to be honest, tonight, that won't necessarily be the most important piece of information, because projections that were released just before the shutdown on polling indicated that it was very unlikely that any of the three blocs would be in a position to win more than the outright majority, and most of them would be far below, which means that now the main issue is, will there be a workable majority out of at least two of the three blocs?
Big questions. Mark Parelman, let's put some of that to you then. A reminder to our viewers, within this period of electoral silence right now, so there are lots of issues we can't talk about as we wait for polls to close in 15 minutes or so. Perhaps, though, we can talk about things like divides in different parts of France. I'm thinking of people in the cities, how they tend to vote, people in more rural areas. That's something that we hear a lot about in France, divisions like that. Your thoughts on that?
Well, clearly, I mean, not my thoughts, the figures. Clearly, when you look at Paris, especially, and the rest of France, it's really, you have one way of voting in Paris and the opposite in the rest of France. Clearly, the National Rally has not really made inroads in Paris, whereas it has dominated the recent European election. 93% of town and villages in the European election saw the National Rally come first. So there's really a huge difference, a contrast, the opposite happening in Paris and in many large cities than the rest of France. It's maybe less true for an election where there's a huge turnout like this, what we're seeing today. 2/3 of the French went to vote. And as I said briefly earlier, there is a difference now because of the Republican front, which by that I mean what's happened between the two rounds. Essentially, the Macron camp and the leftist alliance agreeing, in most cases, to field only the best placed candidate in the 306 triangular races, making them two-way races as a way to really prevent the National Rally from winning. And so the assumption was that with people not seeing their candidates in the second round, they would stay home or go fishing, and this hasn't happened.
Yeah.
And this is really an important factor in the results we're probably going to see in 15 minutes.
I'm not sure it's fishing weather. It's a good point today. Maybe that helps the turnout. Now, Laurent, looking at what Marc talks about is a key issue here, the triangulaire, where candidates from the first round get so much to get them through. If they get more than 50, they're through on their own. But if not, you can have a race with more people. Deepti, on the touch screen, just explain to us how it works.
Well, Gavin, the devil is in the detail. And in fact, as you mentioned, yes, this is a big topic. It has been a big topic since the first round. Les triangulaires, the three-way races. And I'm going to try and explain how it works. So essentially, a candidate needs 12.5% of registered voter numbers to pass through to the second round. So we're talking the 12.5% of total number of voters registered on the electoral roll, not votes. So if they get that, they advance to the second round. In some cases, as was the case, for instance, of Marine Le Pen, she got more than 50% of total votes cast last week, and that qualified her. That essentially meant she won her seat outright from the first round. So as a result of this 12.5% of registered voter numbers, it depends on turnout. In fact, there is a correlation between voter turnout and three-way races. So just to give you a little idea, this is a chart showing you past voter turnout in past parliamentary elections, and this is three-way races in the past as well. So I'm going to try and show you how it works and why there is that direct correlation. Basically, when voter turnout is high, you have a higher chance of getting three-way races, and when voter turnout is low, you have a lower chance. And the reason being that 12.5% actually increases when voter turnout is low. So you can see here, for instance, the last time France had snap elections was in 1997. Voter turnout was at 67.9%, and in that same year, they had 79 three-way races. Now, in the years between, let's say, 2007 and 2017, well, there was decreasing voter turnout. In 2017, voter turnout was historically low in parliamentary elections, and in that year, they had just one three-way race. And as we know, last week, voter turnout was above 65%, and as we know, we had a huge number, a historic number of three-way races. In fact, we had 306 three-way races in total. However, that number is not reflected today because, as we've been mentioning, there is this idea of a Republican bloc vote or some kind of tactical strategy, a bloc strategy. It's not so much a Republican bloc vote anymore because historically the Republican bloc vote has been when all parties band together to prevent the far right from making it through. This time we've seen there have been certain members from the right-wing Les Républicains party who have banded together with the far right. So, but anyway, it is some sort of bloc vote, and as a result, that number went down to 89 three-way races. And there has been a lot of horse trading, if you like, this week. In fact, candidates had about 48 hours after the first round to decide whether they would withdraw from the race or whether they'd be continuing. And you can see that in certain constituencies, there has been a sort of blocked vote. This is Elizabeth Borne's constituency, the former prime minister. And in this race, this candidate from the New Popular Front coalition, Noé Gauchard, pulled out of the race and endorsed Elisabeth Borne. Conversely, this candidate here, Jean-Pierre Pont, from Emmanuel Macron's presidential majority, pulled out without explicitly endorsing the candidate from the left-wing coalition, but nonetheless giving more chance to the left-wing coalition of maybe winning that race. So you sort of see how that three-way strategy works.
Well, let's analyse some of those numbers that Deepti is bringing up there. Patrick Vey with me now. Your thoughts then on what we were seeing there from Deepti, an attempt to form a Republican front with lots of candidates dropping out. Your sense as to how that may play out?
I think what is extremely important that will probably happen tonight is that the people who think and have felt that the French Republic is a presidential regime run by one person, the president, when there is a parliament that is not behind the president with its majority, then we are shifting to a congressional government, which means that the parliament will organize itself, choose a president, discuss between parliamentary groups about who can organize a majority, and go to the president and say, here was the agreement we could make. And the prime minister in that format is the leader of the executive, like it happened in 1997 when Lionel Jospin and the left coalition won after Chirac dissolved the National Assembly. So it will be more complicated this time, but we are shifting regime. We are back to the letter of the Constitution, which make the French Constitution a parliamentary regime and not the practice of it, which has been presidential and more presidential in the last decades.
Briefly, Patrick, when we talk about the Left Alliance, we can kind of throw it away, can't we, to say, oh, it's the Socialists, the Greens, the Communists, the Français Insoumis, the anti-capitalists. This has been difficult for them to get this together, get the band back together. They've broken up before.
Well, the alliance within the presidential majority also has quite broken, with former Prime Minister Edouard Philippe saying that the president has dissolved his own majority. So you will have a lot of conversation between all these new members of parliament, and that will be the next 10 days before the first meeting of the parliament, that things will get together or not.
Let's go to Brussels now. Dave Keating is standing by. A reminder to our viewers that we will get our first projections of results in 8 minutes' time or so. Dave, we've been talking here in the newsroom about the stakes for France, but it's worth saying in this election there are significant stakes for the EU as well.
Yeah, the stakes are very big for the EU as well. In the European Commission behind me, they will be watching this very nervously tonight, because the prospect of a national rally win where they end up controlling the parliament, President Macron stays on. As president, obviously, he continues to represent French foreign policy. He'll be the one coming here to the European Council summits. However, the French legislature needs to pass EU legislation. And if you get a situation where the French parliament is refusing to implement the laws that France is legally bound to transpose, the Commission will have to pursue infringement action, take France to court, and you could really get a very ugly battle between Paris and Brussels that could turn chaotic very quickly. France is a central country, a core country to the European Union, and that kind of fight could actually create some kind of constitutional crisis for the EU. So certainly there's two pledges that RN made during the campaign that has Brussels particularly nervous. One was to unilaterally lower France's contribution to the EU budget. That would be illegal. And second is to roll back on climate legislation, which again the Parliament is legally bound to implement. So certainly people here are watching nervously tonight.
So nobody's watching Netflix in Brussels tonight in the Commission. And just behind Dave, it's worth saying as well, the 13th floor of the EU Commission, Ursula von der Leyen's office, where she lives, where she works. And there will be all eyes potentially on France 24 tonight as we give the result. But from Dave, in Brussels, let's go to Kyiv. Let's speak to Emmanuel Chaz tonight, because foreign policy and, well, what happens in France matters, because we've got a country at war, and what happens here affects what's going on there, doesn't it, Emmanuel?
Absolutely. People here are following what's happening in France very closely tonight. There's a lot of worry. There's also concern, worry because people here are asking themselves, depending on the outcome in France, what will become of Ukraine aid, and that on several levels. France has been delivering those Scalp long-range missiles. Will they still be coming should the government change and fall into the hands of the far right? We know that Marine Le Pen had said that she wouldn't allow her party to enable Ukraine to strike outside of Ukraine in Russian territory. There's a second concern as to the delivery of fighter jets. Will that still be on the agenda? And on the hypothetical standing by France of trainers, military trainers here in Ukraine. And there's also a lot of concern because people here know very well that the Rassemblement National has been partly financed by Russia. Russia here is the aggressor of Ukraine, so obviously there is a concern there that the relationship between Ukraine and France would change drastically come the results tonight.
Emmanuel Chaz, live in Kyiv. Thanks very much indeed. Let's bring back in Mark Perelman, our French politics editor, on some of that. And Mark, Emmanuel is right, isn't she, that, look, the outcome of this election could affect France's foreign policy in really quite significant ways.
In theory, if you listen to Emmanuel Macron, absolutely not. He's in charge of defense, he's in charge of foreign affairs, the Prime Minister only deals with domestic issues.
Right, but there have been far-right leaders within this campaign who've suggested actually they want to do a little more of the foreign policy themselves.
Exactly, I was expecting you to mention that, and this is exactly what happened. Marine Le Pen openly challenged, saying, oh, you know, chief of the military is an honorary title, because if we, on the issue of sending, sensitive issue, obviously, of sending troops to Ukraine, said we're against it, the Prime Minister will not sign the bill financing, authorizing it. So there is a clear challenge, but it's more, I would say, the optics of having the national rally take the helms of France, founding member of the EU, permanent member of the Security Council, and so on and so forth. It could have a huge impact if you couple this with the forthcoming election across the Atlantic in the US.
Absolutely.
Obviously, things could change, especially for Ukraine. And so obviously, this is an election that's watched all over Europe and maybe even beyond, because normally legislative elections, no one really cares because it's a confirmation election, as you've said. But this is an unusual election. It's a real midterm election that could really shape the rest of the mandate of Emmanuel Macron and France's position on diplomatic issues.
Patrick, listening to Mark and just trying to get this idea of the magnitude of the moment you've covered, you've looked across time gone by, elections. Tell me, you know, we've got decades where it's just been two parties since the Fifth Republic. Then 2017, suddenly it was Emmanuel Macron on the scene. Tell me about this moment to you, how significant it is right now.
Well, whatever is the result, the extreme right party will beat a record of number of seats in the parliament. They will have at least 25% of the seats, but fighting all the other parties. And it was only because of the coalition of people who cannot even govern together, from the extreme left to the center right, that they would have been defeated if they are defeated. And so it's a big warning for all the democratic parties. Next time might be not enough that type of coalition. I mean, Marine Le Pen and her party, whatever is the result, is beating a record from the whole history of the French Republic.
Back to 2017, they had 10 seats, didn't they?
Yes, and they had, when we compare it to Vichy, Vichy was a government of extreme right, but because it was under the rule of Nazi Germany, it was not freely elected by the French. So whatever the result is, that is the first important information.
We are nearly inside the very last minute of voting here in France. About 1 minute, 20 seconds to go until the polls close and we find out how France has voted, until we get those first projections. Mark Perelman, your final thoughts then before we see the picture tonight in France.
It's obviously going to be a historical election, whatever the outcome, because first of all, I cannot tell you who is going to be France's next prime minister. It's very unusual. It seemed last Sunday that Jordan Bardella, the national rally president, was the most likely to be prime minister. It's become much more uncertain. So what happens tonight is obviously key, but what will happen in the coming days, having a German, Italian-like coalition agreement or disagreement, we'll have to see, is clearly absolutely new in France politics.
We have about 30 seconds till we get a revelation moment. Mark, briefly, what is the President likely to be doing now? Glued to the television? Give us a sense behind the scenes.
Glued to the television. He probably has the results, and he might decide to speak tonight. That's what we're hearing. It's uncertain. He did so a few weeks ago when he called that election.
We have 9 seconds to find out if President Macron's gamble made 4 weeks ago has worked. And we can show you the predicted results tonight. And we have a plot twist from the estimations, the polls. It is tonight the new Popular Front that are the biggest party in the country. The alliance of the Socialists, the Communists, the Greens and La France Insoumise, Rassemblement, between 172 and 192 seats. In second place, we're looking at Emmanuel Macron's Together presidential majority, 150 to 170 seats. Now we're looking at the far-right alliance, 132 to 152 seats. As Patrick said a moment ago, growing, but not what they were once predicted in the polls, with a majority just last week. And then Republicans on the centre-right, 57 to 67, others 14 to 19. We're going to go to the headquarters where the gathering is of the Left Alliance. These are the scenes right now, live in the centre of Paris. The night belongs to the left, the fireworks, the flags, the waving. Look at the disbelief too in the faces tonight. They were not expecting this.
Mark, this is a political upset, isn't it? This isn't what the polls had told us to expect tonight. We were expecting the far right to have the most seats in Parliament, according to these projections. Let's remember, they are just projections, but the new Popular Front, the left-wing alliance, on between 172 and 192 seats. Extraordinary.
Yes, we had an earthquake in the first round with the National Rally and its allies really coming with a historical performance. The assumption was that they would have the largest bloc in Parliament, and the only question was whether they would have an absolute or a relative majority. However, because of the Republican Front, which is an alliance between Macron's camp and the new leftist alliance, most of the three-way races became two-way races, and this changed the election. But no one could have predicted that, according to the seat projections, and those are only seat projections, so we have to be careful, the leftist alliance would come first, Emmanuel Macron's camp would come second, and the National Rally third. This is an upset all the way. I mean, if you had to tell, it would have been National Rally first, leftist alliance second, Macron third. Well, none of this happened tonight. What's interesting, though, is that there is no majority, and we're far from a majority. The magic number is 289. All the camps are 100 seats short of that. So this means tonight we're entering a new phase, more of a parliamentary system, because there will have to be a coalition for a government to be formed and to function. So yes, it's truly uncharted waters, charted territory, or name it as you want. This is a major upset, and we're really entering a very new phase in French politics.
A very new phase in French politics. It's happened twice in the history of the Fifth Republic, where there has been a relative majority is the term, where it's not an absolute majority, so coalition building starts. But the night, those live pictures, we're going to go back to Paris. It belongs to that left alliance. Remember, Emmanuel Macron's gamble exactly 4 weeks ago, saying he saw a narrow path. Well, has that gamble paid off? Not for his party, but allowing what he calls the Republican arc to have victory, a possible coalition, because adding the two together, if they can work together, a hold-your-nose moment, does that mean they could be in coalition? Let's go to Yinka Ayotade. What's going on where you are? I can see the crying, the tears and the joy.
People are happy here. People are very, very excited. As you can hear behind me, there's lots of cheering, lots of woos. This is a big victory for the new Popular Front. they were able to pull together just in the wake of those European election results. Just in 4 days, they were able to pull together and come together as a coalition, the Socialists, the Communists, the France Unbowed Party and the Greens, and they've managed to do it in this second round. They've managed to come out on top. They were able to pull off this Republican front. They were able to pull out their candidates that were in the third place in those three-way races, and were able to keep that vote against the National Rally undivided, and they've succeeded. It's a massive victory for them. We've seen flags being waved around. We've seen fireworks going off. People here are just very excited.
Right, let's break down, because the other point, Yinka, is about the power balance now, because within that left alliance, we're going from the Social Democrats, we're going to look at the Green Party, the Communist Party as well, and also France Unbowed, anti-capitalist. So let's have a look who might have the bigger hand. Let's go to Diptyque Laurent.
Right here, Gavin, this breakdown of that chart here. These are the projected seats, of course, just projections right now. This is the New Popular Front, so that's that left-wing coalition, projected to pick up about 172 to 192 seats. You have the presidential majority, Emmanuel Macron's presidential majority, set to get...
Diptyque, we'll come back to you in a moment. Let's go first to the leader of France Unbowed, the winner tonight as part of the alliance. This is Jean-Luc Mélenchon.
At the end of this electoral campaign, where everybody was confronted with their choices, the people finally has chosen, and I can only recognize the efforts made by all those who finally arrived at tonight's result, and I can only hail those who accepted to run, those who accepted to step down, and all those who went door to door, face to face, to convince everyone, and at the end obtain a result which was claimed to be impossible. There was a huge effort of civil responsibility. We can only admire this at a time when political life seems to be receding. We were able to push the threat away. Tonight, the National Rally is far from having the absolute majority that seemed to be within reach a couple of weeks ago. Quite the opposite. It's a huge relief for a huge majority of people in the country, those who make up the new France and those who have always loved France with Republican passion. These voters were concerned, but now they can be reassured they have won. With their ballots, a majority made a new choice for the country. The will of the people must be strictly respected, and from now on, no arrangement, no combination will be acceptable. Indeed, the lessons of this vote are quite clear. The defeat of the President and his coalition have been confirmed. The President must recognize this defeat and should not attempt to circumvent it in any way. The Prime Minister must step down. Indeed, he never received the trust of the National Assembly. He's just run this campaign that his camp has lost, and this was a complete disavowal by the people. It is the President's duty to call on a new Popular Front to run the country. The new Popular Front is ready. It will abide by the mandate given by its candidates. It will be as good as its word. The new Popular Front will apply its program, nothing but its program, but all of its program. This program is a whole, none of the constituents can be separated from the expenditures or the measures that are to come into force. From this summer on, the new measures can be adopted by decree, abrogating retirement at age 64, blocking the prices, increasing minimum wage, the convening of collective bargaining agreements. All this work is before us. We announced it last week and we will confirm this to the President of the Republic. We will not get into negotiations with this party to engage in combinations, especially having fought relentlessly for the past 7 years his policy of social mistreatment and his positions that the French people have disavowed, especially after the vote has made this so clear, especially after the new People's Front, in spite of all the blows received on all sides, all the insults, will stand up and keep and abide by the mandate given by the people. From now on, the ballot boxes have decided between two completely opposite projects that were running against one another. The new Popular Front is ready to run. It's the only consistent ideology with a clear program, with clear figures. Its components from the United Left are up to historical circumstances, and indeed, it was able to thwart the trap set to the country, and once again, it was able to save the Republic, and once again, it can start the ecological and social endeavor which our people, our periods, our Europe needs so badly. Comrades, men and women around the countries, you were expecting this moment that turned around all expectations thanks to your commitment, thanks to your loyalty, abiding by the instructions given. You should remember the words of the poet in the summer sun over the Provence, over the mountains. Something in the air now has this full transparency, this taste of happiness, which come to my mouth. France, my country.
You're watching France 24 on a momentous moment. According to the projections, a plot twist. We are not seeing, according to the polls of the last few days and 3 weeks, let's face it, which suggested it was going to be a possible far-right national rally majority. It is, in fact, according to projections from Ipsos, which have been accurate over the years, the Left Alliance on 172 to 192, a relative majority, but not enough for an absolute majority. Coalition building in second place, 150 to 170, the presidential majority of President Macron's alliance. Now, listening to the words of Jean-Luc Mélenchon, let's just take in the profundity of what he said. He called on President Macron to step down. He said he should not try to circumnavigate this in any way. He talked about the defeat of the president, in his words, the coalition. He said a combination is not acceptable. I want to go first to Mark Perelman, French politics editor. first out the gate, first to speak tonight.
Well, like last week, basically, Jean-Luc Mélenchon preempting all the other political leaders. He didn't ask the president to leave. He says the prime minister has to leave, but Emmanuel Macron has to admit the results from tonight and that he lost, despite all what he is probably going to say or the prime minister will have to say. But Jean-Luc Mélenchon already saying that the prime minister has to leave, that the leftist alliance won those elections. They should be handed the reins of power. He said that they will apply their program, all of their program, and they're not willing to negotiate potential alliance. This could be a salvo, obviously, within this leftist alliance, because what's really going to be interesting is how you break down the figures within the alliance. There are 4 parties, and it seems, according to the polling we have, but Mathieu probably knows this better than I, that France Unbound is clearly not the dominant. They're ahead in terms of seat projections, but not that far ahead from the Socialist Party. And this was not the case. And so this could mean that Jean-Luc Mélenchon is already warning the rest of the left, don't go and negotiate with Emmanuel Macron an alliance, because he probably knows that's what's likely to happen.
So he's taking the move, taking the moment, calling on Gabriel Attal to go, which, given the results we've got at the moment, he's in a position to be able to say that, depending, as you say, on the power structure. And I want to go to you in a second, Mathieu. I want to get a breakdown of, within that, the victorious left alliance, from Deep Ticoler on the screen, who holds the power there?
Well, Gavin, what you have on the top here are those projected seats per coalition. So we've been giving you those seats. This is a breakdown regarding that new Popular Front. So that's that left-wing coalition encompassing 4 different parties varying on the political spectrum. So you have here the Greens picking up 32 to 36 seats. You have the Socialist Party, so they're picking up about 63 to 69 seats. Once again, these are all just projections. The France Unbound Party, that is Jean-Luc Mélenchon's party, they're projected to pick up 68 to 74 seats, and the Communists there about 10 to 12. So you really see that breakdown within this projection of that coalition. 172 to 192 seats projected to win, so they would be the party which would have the most seats per these projections, Gavin.
Mathieu, listening to Deep Ticoler's breakdown, when will we get a sense of the result itself? And as you were saying to us before, it's quite clear in the past Ipsos have been bang on the money.
No, I think we're very close to the final tally, and so we can first observe that if the tally is confirmed, we would have the most democratically representative parliament in the world, and not by design, which is very funny, because we haven't got a proportional representation voting system, but the outcome of the election is more representative than what the Germans or the Spaniards have, because we haven't got this 5% threshold. And in the end, compared with the majority in the UK, you can see the difference with the same share.
I'm going to interrupt for a moment, Mathieu. We're going to come back. We're going to go to the Socialists and Olivier Faure, its leader, speaking now, part of that left alliance.
Its highest levels, bringing the country to terrible uncertainty. But tonight, France refused the arrival of the national rally to a place of fire. I should like to thank the millions of French men and women who help us breathe a sigh of relief. This is the victory, of course, of the new People's Party, reflecting the philosophy, the hope of the left against the threat of the extreme right. We avoided the worst, but this vote alone should not remain just a moment of respite. We should start a new era, new dimensions for this country. There will be a before and an after the 7th of July. In the next few days, it will be for the People's Front, indeed our family, the Socialist family, to lay the new foundations of a collective program for the country, bringing together a vast majority of French men and women. France deserves better than a choice between neoliberalism and fascism, which had been the case for the past 7 years. Our front has a huge responsibility. It has to find a new way, a new path for France, indeed meet the expectations of French men and women, address the issues of war, climate, inequalities, and make France's voice heard around the world. We will not lend ourselves to unlikely coalitions running against the wishes of the French. Thus, protracting Macronist policies. There's only one thing we want. We want to ensure that this country should come together after so many fractures and fragmentations, right up to the last days of this election, when the National Front decided to, the National Rally decided to, and attempted to divide the country. Now the country should unite around clear values, that of the Republic, so that never again should one face one another, wondering whether we should walk side by side or against one another. And so, the new People's Front should take on board this new page of history. In this approach, we have only one compass, the program of the new People's Front. Tonight, we have achieved a relative majority, not an absolute majority, and so those who were disavowed 3 times running should recognize, to admit defeat, and in the coming year, they should never vote alongside the extreme right to prevent the new People's Front from running the country. I should also like to turn to the millions of men and women who thought that the far right could be a solution. We have to understand their concerns, their worries, their anger. We have to mend and heal the wounds of this country. We had small cracks. We are facing abysses. But now we have to recognize that the time of contempt is over.
Le travail doit payer. L'inflation n'est pas la conséquence de salaires trop élevés.
Must pay off. Inflation is not the consequence of inflated wages, but extreme profits. People should be able to make ends meet. Homes should be heated in the winter. Retirees should be able to remain in good health. And the reform of retirement at age 64 should be abrogated. And indeed, the reform of the unemployment benefit system should be completely set aside. The many crises, COVID, climate, socio-economic concerns, have led a majority of the French having to tighten their belts while a small minority enjoyed huge profits. We cannot have all the efforts made by the middle class. It is high time to tax the super rich and the privileged. The ecological transition cannot wait. We've wasted too much time as it is. Development of renewable energies is an absolute priority. Energy renovation of homes should be a priority, as is purchasing power. This requires planning, major investments with the help of Europe. Public services, including health and education, are now running out of breath, out of steam. Everything should be done for access to education and health be guaranteed all over the territory. Respectful and respected. And so, a return to local proximity police should become a priority, as well as its resources to fight against drug trafficking. Individual rights should be protected, especially those of women or French nationals living in the country, regardless of the color of their skin, their origins, their religions, or indeed their sexual orientations. The time has come for a secular and brotherly republic to come back. Democracy cannot be the fact of a single person. Doing away with individual power was our original project, and we must resume this philosophical concept that was at the origin. The role of citizens, of great institutions, of local authorities, that should be restored at long last. It is on that basis that the new People's Front has defined its commitments, and this is the basis upon which the new parliamentary debate will begin. We will ask the President to enable Parliament to come out of the dead end in which he had propelled it. We have to listen to the voices of the French. We will do it with utmost energy, making our values crystal clear, accepting responsibility. The time has come to recognize our role. Long live the Republic, long live France.
You're watching Election Night live here on France 24 as we digest that extraordinary news, a political upset here, that the left-wing alliance has come out ahead in this election, upsetting what the polls had predicted. The far right, according to this polling, according to the projections, in third place. Ensemble, the presidential majority there, in second place. Extraordinary results indeed. You were just listening to Olivier Faure, who's the head of the Socialist Party as part of that left-wing coalition. And so Olivier Faure there, your leader, speaking after this great result for your party tonight. It was a long speech, but I note he didn't mention who he thinks is going to step up to be the leader of the left-wing grouping now, given that you are four parties, four different leaders. Is Olivier Faure in position now to become France's possible Prime Minister? And I am so sorry before I can let you answer that question, I'm just hearing that Jordan Bardella, the leader of the National Rally Party, is just starting to speak live. Let's listen to him.
From metropolitan France and abroad, this second round of these snap elections have given the French people a voice. With a historical turnout, the French have paid tribute to our democracy. I would like to thank all our voters, those of the National Rally and its allies,